So today here we have is Danny Pantuso, and Danny is an undergraduate from Stanford University, and he is going to be a PM at a startup in Iceland, which is super unique. Danny's my only one of my friends who got a PM job outside of the United States. So let's welcome Danny.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no, Danny, thanks for coming to talk. So first, why don't you just start off by telling everyone a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, where you interned, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'm born and bred in Silicon Valley. I grew up here, went to public schooling. My parents were both VCs. So my mom's a CFO of a venture capital firm, and my dad was a partner there. And so I grew up like around startups a lot. And I started my first startup when I was 13. In my garage, I was stringing tennis rackets. So I don't know if you can quite call that a startup, but it was me and my twin sister. We were going out, hustling for rackets, stringing them and delivering them. And so that was my first kind of take into this product management, to this idea of self-starting. And then I went to Stanford University. I graduated with a degree in management science and engineering, which is a really cool degree that's kind of half design thinking, which is a methodology for creativity, and half data science. So kind of like crunching the numbers, finding insights that way, and then testing it via design thinking. So that was the major, and I got to apply those skills to some really fundamental internships. So the first one was at the California Department of Finance. It was good because I learned everything I hated. It was a terrible internship. I was stuck in bureaucracy, and I realized I did not want to do that. I felt powerless, and every day I thought about quitting. My second internship was with Philip, and that's where we met, and it was an amazing one at ZX Ventures. So I'm sure you've told your viewers about this, but essentially what that was is we were put on a small team of 3 in my case, including myself, and we were tasked with creating a new product for Anheuser-Busch and the health beverage industry. So we spent 10 weeks kind of going from fundamental hypotheses about what's going to work to actually building out the concepts, testing it, and ultimately getting a drink in the bottle. So that was an amazing experience. That's where I met Philip. So been friends ever since then. And then my last internship, I worked at innovation consulting, and all of these were in New York.
Awesome. So when you were doing your internships and picking your major, were you trying to kind of craft a narrative about yourself, or were you just kind of picking whatever you enjoyed? Or what really were the decision factors for you deciding the internships you did?
Yeah, it's a great call. So the I guess I would say I lucked into it, but it was also a little bit of direction. So I went with the Department of Finance because I thought this will help me determine whether I want to go economics or my major, which is management science and engineering, and it steered me away from economics. So that was good because I realized I didn't want to do public policy. Then the next year, as it came to ZX Ventures, I actually just went to the career fair, and they had a table there, and they were talking about innovation and beer, and I was like, this is going to be cool. I'll apply. And I actually didn't realize how, I would say, lucky I got until I was in the office, realizing what an amazing opportunity. I was 20 at the time, and they were, giving me and my team $25,000 and, little bit of management, and said, go run with this. And so that was like truly eye-opening. I think once I experienced that, I was like, I think I want to do this more of creative development. So then my next internship, I looked for the same kind of things. And, very similar to product management is innovation consulting. That's the same idea of helping to build products for bigger companies, but it's not always products. It could be kind of new sales strategies or new slogans or whatever. So I was working with Dick's Sporting Goods there. And what I realized about that internship was I didn't like the consulting as much. In consulting, you're very much pitching an idea. And the idea actually, in my case, didn't have to be that good. It doesn't have to work because ultimately you are pitching a soundbite. You're not the one carrying it forward. As a product manager, you are absolutely responsible for the success of that. And it's, those metrics are recorded every day. And so, I really want to be closer to the product, I would say more responsible, more, having those, your insights really translate into product improvements. It's what drew me to product management. So I think by the end of that internship, I knew what I was looking for. And at that point, it was just one industry.
All right, Danny, so you've had a lot of great internships, ton of really good experience. Is there anything that you picked up along the way from getting those internships that you think were really helpful or fundamental?
Fundamental for getting the job ultimately.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, I think along the way in those internships, what I learned the most was just about myself. And so it's kind of two things. One is just a I would say an inclination towards product management about like, okay, I'm generally in these leadership positions. I like jobs where I can explore the problem and define the solution. That's really exciting. And the second thing was also about like learning your own personal working habits. I'd say a big part of, and you hear this a ton, a big part of product management is communication and teamwork, right? You're not leading from the top, you're leading as kind of a joiner. And I remember at my time at Alexa, I was so focused on solving the problem, the daily problem, which was which design are we going to go for? How are we going to need these bottles, et cetera, that I would jeopardize my relationships, right? You're kind of curt, you're not taking the time to get to know people and help them solve their problems. And I think, now one of the biggest tips I can have is as you apply and as you actually work, make sure to put an emphasis on the people, right? And communicate well. And because you're going to face a lot of problems every day, what's going to be the same is the people you work with. So don't trade the relationships you have for a small problem, because there's always going to be a problem, and take that into the interviews as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And now, like, because your internships were all really like very diverse, they were all very different, like internal entrepreneur, consulting, working for a public office. When did you find out what product management was? And you kind of touched on this, but what really drew you to that specific role and, staying away from all the other roles you were involved in?
Right. Well, so it was the fact that consulting, I felt like, was much more of a soundbite, and I wanted to be towards the product. And I think actually the two things that really got me onto it is my senior year, I launched a startup called Benchwarmers. It was a mobile app, and it was about betting on live sports. And so it was me and two other friends in my dorm were coding this up and building it. I was in charge of basically testing it in focus groups, and like I was super scrappy. I was using like Venmo and GroupMe and like whatever else to test this idea before we even built an app, right? And so it was a mess, but it ended up kind of helping us iterate before we got launched. It ultimately, didn't get the numbers we wanted for us to go full time. But that said, I think, that really helped me be like, okay, like, I can go do this. I think a lot of people watching this feel the same way as entrepreneurship. It's just about doing it. There's no one job. People will be consultants and think that'll get them to the next place. Well, I don't think there's one thing that'll get you to be an entrepreneur other than passion and the will to do it. And so I think it was that, and this also this senior capstone project where I was working with a gaming company, doing a little bit of the same, but it was more project management. So a little less like defining the concept and more like, how are we going to build this? How are we going to test this? And laying that calendar out was like the mix of the two was like, oh, this is really cool. What is this? Oh, it's product management. And so by senior year, you were on this way before me, and I'll give you total credit on that. Because the earlier you can get it, the better. This is a big thing that I'm sure we'll talk about, but I started late, senior spring probably, and had a few other commitments at the time. And so that meant I was still applying after school was out, for better or for worse. But if I could recommend one thing, it's apply in the fall. Your senior fall is when the big companies are looking to do that. So if you miss that window, you're not dead by any means. It's just harder.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you. I mean, I kind of started trying to shape my narrative for product management pretty early on, because there's the same things that for me that you really enjoy, and I think that is the benefit. Now, so you said about spring, you realized I want to do product management. So take us through that journey going from spring, your senior year, to currently now preparing your visa to move to Iceland.
Yeah. So come spring, I was kind of acting head of, of the fraternity. So that was kind of closing a lot of that out. It took a lot of my time. And so I wasn't applying full time. I also was working on this project, the senior project I was mentioning, and I thought I was going to work there full time. They'd actually given me an offer to be a product manager there. And basically 2 weeks after I graduated, they took that offer back. They didn't raise the funding they wanted. It was tough, man. It was really tough. And I'm sure some of your viewers have felt the same way, but that's just fate. Sometimes you just get dealt a bad hand. But then I was left without a job, basically 2 weeks into it, when I thought I was going to start in the next 2 weeks. And so that just meant going out and trying again. And so I think the things that helped me as kind of a North Star was I knew I wanted to do gaming, and I knew I wanted to do product management. So I would have taken kind of a different role, maybe as a data scientist in gaming, if that helped me get to be, a product manager in gaming. Or on the flip side, I'd take a product management role that wasn't gaming, if that was product management.
Yeah.
So with those two, but and I'm happy to go into more detail, because there's actually a lot to unpack within what that looks like applying post graduation and off cycle, basically is what they call it.
Yeah. No, I mean, let's get there. So right now you're middle of the summer, your startup completely bailed on you after working for them for free for 4 months through your capstone project. Now that's brutal. Now, what did you end up doing? So like you had to make a lot of trade-offs in terms of like, am I going to take a data science role at a gaming company? Am I going to have to be a PM somewhere else? So like, how'd you end up recruiting for that? Because I mean, typically for like me, and I think a lot of other people, just apply on the website, get the referral, that's it. So what is it like doing it completely off cycle?
Right. Well, it's a great question. It's similar and it's dissimilar. So on the flip side, I think you got to use your networks a lot more. It becomes a lot more about timing, right? So the big companies like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, they hire very specifically in the fall, and they get ready for their summer hires to come in, and start at a very specific time. If you've missed that, you've missed it. There's no getting in that door. But then there are other companies, and one company that I ended up getting a job at called Zora, public fintech company in San Mateo. Their need just arose in, I would say, July, early August. And I happened to be looking for jobs then. I applied. They got back to me. That process moved quick, 3 weeks, right? It didn't actually, Philip, you put me in contact with one of your great friends who is the founder or CEO. And we were talking about me coming on as someone similar to a product management role. And that was just timing and networking. And then a few other things. I would say just keep your head up, keep applying to things. One of the most crushing things I found is half the jobs that are posted online are not actually open, whether they've been filled, or I found this regularly where I'd email the hiring manager and they'd be like, oh, actually, we aren't hiring for that anymore. We forgot to take that down. And you'd be like, oh, I wrote a cover letter, I changed my resume for this, small things. I think people always say, tailor your resume. I'd say tailor your resume if the job reads as, this is my dream job. And I've said that multiple times. Look, being like, oh, this is my dream job. Oh, this is my dream job, which is totally fine. You have multiple, but you're wasting your time if you're like writing a new resume for every single one, because a lot of them are quick reads. Secondly, a lot of places don't read cover letters. I think you're kind of wasting your time unless they specifically ask one. Like Blizzard is a game publisher. They'll ask why Blizzard, or what games have you played in the past. Then you should write that. Otherwise, not even. For instance, Activision. I talked to one recruiter who said, I don't read the cover letter. And most people don't. So I would say focus more on kind of the dream jobs, and then casting a wide net and being quick to respond.
Yeah, no, I mean, Danny, that's the exact advice I give, because just like, you have to apply to so many places, and the amount of effort it takes to try really, really hard for like one company is so like exponentially more than other ones, that I think it's better to just try really hard for like 5. And then, the skills that you're using with that 5 for prepping for interviews spill over for the other ones, but you're better off just like really prepping for your number one choices. So you said you got one offer from the public company in San Mateo. You were talking with my friend Alex. So in the end, what ended up happening?
So basically I had these 3 options, and the third one came late. This is the one I took in Iceland. But the first option was at Zora. I'd be an associate product manager. And I think on paper it looked great. Great pay, senior management, product management that had come from Google, that had come from SAP. So really, top-notch product management that I could learn from, really close to home, a very comfortable lifestyle. The second one with Alex is a phenomenal guy, a CEO of a startup. There's 3 people, and they're really looking to go into hyper growth. So I'd be kind of chief of staff, solving problems from like fixing the lighting to like, how are we going to establish the values of how we make this product? And then this third one was Iceland. So they're called Travelshift. They do tour guide planning for packages in Iceland. And so my thought around that was I'd say a lot about gut. This is something you won't hear a lot from product managers. You hear a lot about like make the table, give yourself a score 1, 2, 3 and rate these. I actually just kind of went with my gut. I think with Alex, it was just too soon. For me, like Alex is a phenomenal guy, but there were just 3 people. I didn't know them very well. They wanted to be quick. I probably expected to work like crazy hours and hop right into the startup life. And I think knowing myself, I kind of wanted to get a little bit more product management experience, learning, by example, learning by kind of protocol, as opposed to just drinking out of a fire hose and then the second example, I think San Mateo is, the job in San Mateo, Zora, everything checked the box, but I just wasn't passionate about it. Zora does billing for big companies, right? And who can say that's just sexy? it would have gotten me to the next place for sure. It's fintech, it's in Silicon Valley. I learn a lot. Everything checked the box except for my gut. It just didn't, my heart wasn't in it. And so then I got this offer in Reykjavik, Iceland. And that was 2 days before I was going to accept this. I was supposed to work at Zora. I already accepted the job. 2 days before. I know, I don't think I told you this. So 2 days before I'm supposed to start, I get this offer and I'm like, oh my God, like, I can't turn this down. My heart is just too much in this. So I went to the office, and I think this is, a small thing, but a big thing. Went to the office. I thought to myself, how would I want to be let down about my hire 2 days before? And it wasn't by text or by email. I just went in the office. I told him, hey, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And I sat him down. I said, this is an opportunity I can't pass up. It's a venture of a lifetime. I've been in San Diego my whole life, and I need to go out and do something else. And they were like, hey, I totally understand. And the best of luck to you. And when you're done with that, we'd love to have you back. So that was like so much encouragement that I needed to go. And now I've accepted this job. So it's been, 6 weeks in the making, but I've close to having my visa, and I head out in 2 weeks to go work in Iceland.
Yeah, no, that's sick. You actually didn't tell me that you just 2 days before you started. No, that's nuts. But I think you handled that really well. Like, I feel like a lot of people really stress over the fact of, reneging on an offer or taking back your word. But I think is like you're realistically a blip on their radar. Like, those managers in a year are not going to really remember you. And if you reapplied, they'd be like, oh, like, this kid looks great. Like, they might remember. But I think as long as you really handle it like you did, that's a great way. I don't know if I would have gone in for person. I probably would have made a phone call. But
it's tough. I figured I could. If they were anywhere else, they're 10 minutes away. To your point, though, it's hard. It's hard. I know, like, but also you said it, you hit the nail on the head. It's a slight inconvenience for them to fill this role with some other very smart guy who really wants it. For me, it's 2-3 years of my life, and so you just had to make this. I just had to make the decision that I thought would be best.
Yeah. Did you negotiate your current Iceland offer at all?
So no, I didn't actually. I here and there. So not on the pay. The pay was kind of, they said, like, this is kind of what we can do, because they actually weren't necessarily. They were looking for a product manager, but they weren't looking for one like right now. So I'm like, well, I need an offer right now. They said, well, we don't have the budget for it. So here's this, but we expect you to grow into this very quickly and increase your pay really quickly. What I did negotiate was a flight out there, an extra bag, and help finding housing, which I didn't realize how important that would be. But this help finding housing, one of the guys I interviewed with was actually looking for new housing. And then I asked if he wanted to live together. And so we're moving in. We just signed the lease yesterday.
Well, I can tell you I've never heard of someone ending up living with their interviewer.
Yeah, I know, right?
So Danny, so this is super unique. I really haven't talked to any U.S. students that have gone really to work outside the country, except maybe Canada, or do a nonprofit or a program. So do you have any advice or tips for getting jobs outside the U.S. as a college student?
Yeah, I'd say, it's two parts. I'd say the way I've seen a lot of people do it, because I've started to kind of tap into an expat community of people who just graduated, is you start somewhere and then get transferred into, their Amsterdam office, their London office. So you start in the US, and after a year and a half, you get switched. That's pretty common at Goldman and stuff, where they have these international offices. They want you to do that. The second thing I'd say, the way to do it is really connections. So don't bother applying to international jobs. I was applying to them, and every single one of them, they have the politeness of getting back to you. American companies just won't, but they get back to you and they say, we're not doing it. So, this was actually a connection through my dad. A friend of my dad was an investor, and he said, they're hiring for this kind of role. You should apply. I'll put my name to it. So that kind of changed the balance there of okay, this is suddenly worth it. You've got some backing. Another example was I was talking to one company about being a data scientist in Amsterdam. And this was a crazy turn of events. I had applied to one job at Facebook, and I wanted a friend of a friend to recommend me. And she was at Instagram. That didn't pan out, but she at the same time had sent my application or my resume to her friend, and her friend's husband was like, oh my God,
absurd.
We could see this guy in our data science program in Amsterdam. And so I got a LinkedIn message 2 weeks later saying hey, this is super weird. And he had to connect the dots. And I was like, oh, that's how you got my resume. But anyway, it ended up being a job. a potential job offer. And I didn't pursue that one because it was data science and I didn't want to do that. But I think that's the way to do it. If you want to go international, it's networking. And a lot of networking is chance. But I think, what's that saying of like, there's something about luck is just like, an accumulation of skill and practice.
Just keeping trying again and again. Yeah, like you create your own luck.
Exactly. And I think that's the case. So, but really you need a connection. I'd say that's the big thing if you're trying to go international.
Got it. So if you could go back at all, like say a year or two, or even just before you started recruiting, is there anything you wish you did differently or wish you knew that you now know?
Oh, man, so many things. That's such a good question. The first thing about cycles, right? Get on cycle, apply in the fall to these big programs. It will change the game. You can get an application, you can get an early offer. That's confidence. That's something to negotiate with. A lot of the biggest companies, a lot of small companies look for 2 years product management experience. You'll see that everywhere, product management experience. And you're like, well, how do I become a product manager if I don't have that? This is a great opportunity. Is getting in early in the fall for like those big companies. I'd say the second thing is persistence. I think there were at least 3 times, I actually even put it on a calendar right here. I'll show you this in a bit, where I said, I'm starting from scratch today, where I had gotten to the 5th round of this one interview and I didn't get the job. And I'm like, wow, I'm nowhere. And just nothing's hitting. People who said they'd help didn't help, contacts that, places where I had 4 interviews and then set up a lunch date, didn't show up, didn't hit me back up. It's like, wow, it's so rude, but it happens. And I'd say it's persistence, and knowing what you want, right? And kind of being true to that. I think I had a job offer that would have been paid way less. That would have been marketing. It wouldn't have been what I wanted. And I had to say no. My parents were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm waiting for the right job. I didn't just, I haven't been waiting for the last month just to take the first thing. So I think it's another thing, and that requires some savings too. So I'm paying rent at my own house. And so that's dipping into savings to live here. But I think it was worth it, right? To get the job that I think I will really love. And the last thing is, a lot of this stuff takes follow-up, right? So you're the king of this. You're so on top of your stuff. And you helped me so much with your email. So it's like a follow-up email, right? Like a few weeks after you apply. That's helped me get so many more responses, or get, once a recruiter sees your stuff, that's all you're trying to do. And so to do that, actually, I'll show you on the wall, I created a little bit of a Scrum Board, which you guys I'm sure are familiar with. And so this is basically just, it's got various priorities, and it's basically to do, work in progress, follow up, and done. And so I'm moving these Post-it notes based on the 3 categories I laid out for myself, which were consulting, gaming, and product management. So that was just a way for me to keep track, because as I'm sure you've all experienced, you send out a gazillion applications every day. It's hard to keep track of what's what until they get back to you. And that means, following up, and that is hard. So, give yourself a little bit of a schedule and a routine, and it becomes way easier.
Yeah, no, I mean, I used an Excel sheet instead of making my, wall and a piece of art. But no, it's super interesting. I actually had someone, and I don't want to say the company, but like someone once told me like, oh, looking forward to having you as an APM like at our company after we had like our 30-minute networking call. And then I didn't get past the first like case study part of the interview, and like I emailed them like reaching out, not even like a, hey, can you like help me reverse this? So it's more like, hey, can you help me figure out what happened? And 3 emails later after following up with them, never heard back. Which is just like nuts. Someone would say that and then just like completely ghost you. But yeah, no, 100% it agrees with you. Agree with you, Danny. But yeah, no, really appreciate hearing like your story, how you prepared. It was all super helpful. Is there anything else you want to add before we close this?
Yeah, trying to think of some last tips, some final tips. So so go to career fairs. When I was on campus, I thought they were like silly. You're just going to, I didn't know how valuable were. Those are your phenomenal chances to go put your resume in front of a recruiter, have a genuine chat. If they like you, you get a check plus, and it's almost guaranteed to interview, right? On online jobs, get 200 applicants in the first hour. You can see that number on like using LinkedIn Premium, and that's so regular. So it's a chance to stand out. If they're on your campus, they're looking for you. So don't waste that opportunity. It's worthwhile. Digging into that a little bit, I would say there are a few tips that you can have. I'd say on your first one, and you won't read this in like product management books because I've read them all. is I would say don't wear a name tag if you're at a career fair. Why? That sounds stupid. Well, the first thing is when you go with the name tag, you're kind of telling them you should know my name right away, and then you know theirs, and they spend on the other side, you're spending 30 seconds as a recruiter just trying to remember this guy's name and not embarrass yourself. And really, you should skip that. What they're not gonna remember your name. They're gonna remember your story. So go in and tell a story, right, and have something kind of interesting to say. I remember one of the best kind of career fair interviews I had was at Bose. They had a booth there, and I was making some headphone pillows so that you could sleep with your headphones, because I'd broken 4 pairs of headphones by sleeping in them. And the guy was like, that's crazy. So can you tell me how you made this? And I was showing him photos, and he was like, I totally love that. And by the end of the day, he didn't know my name, but he was asking for it twice. Then he pulled out my resume out of the sleeve, put a lot of things on it. I got hit up the next day saying, would you like to go to our second round interviews right away? Now, don't expect that kind of success every time. And it's not all just because your name tag wasn't on, but it's that sense of go and connect with the person first, tell them about you. This isn't kind of like a 30-second speed dating opportunity where here's my number, let me take your number, here's what I do, what do you do? It's actually get to know them. Don't be afraid to ask hard questions too. Hey, I saw online that you guys talk a lot about how immersive your online learning program is. What does that mean? What makes you guys actually immersive? I saw online, on the Glassdoor that it said you guys work really hard for bad compensation. What do you think about that? Is that fair? Those are the kind of questions that really help you connect, are actually valuable, as opposed to just hi, so what do you do? What kind of jobs are open? Last thing, do your research. You should know what jobs and where, and come in with a game plan.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with that. I don't know about not wearing the name tag, but really just focusing on is no one is going to remember your name. I 100% agree with that. They'll just remember you. That's why I always try and throw in I sponsored for snowboarding and hike, snowboarding. That way everyone remembers me as this one snowboarding kid was really cool. And that's trying to get anything that's unique, pillow headphones, exact same thing, really, really unique. Yeah, Danny, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you so much.
I hope you have a great rest of your day.